So good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm absolutely delighted to be your moderator today in what is my first event, and I'm very pleased about, with a relatively newly formed, although it feels like it was a million years ago already, and one of our newest members of the British Chambers of Commerce International Membership Network, the UK-Liberia Chamber of Commerce. It's a real honor and pleasure to be with you and working with you today. We have a fantastic panel, but before we start our discussion around all things trade and investment with Liberia, I'd like to tell you a little bit about me, just so you know who I am. So I am the British Chambers of Commerce Director of Global Business Networks. Essentially what that means is that my role is to grow the BCC's global footprint. We are now 74 British international chambers located across pretty much most markets across the world, that are directly linked to the every regional hub and chamber in the UK. And between them, their role is really to drive trade and business between their respective members. My background is that I come originally from industry. I moved into the world of chambers several moons ago. Previously to this role, I was the CEO of the British Chambers Network in Europe. So I know chambers well, and it's been a great pleasure to work with them for many years. Some of you may not know this, but Liberia is Africa's first republic, which was a brilliant, one of those interesting facts that was great to find. It's unfortunately often been in the press for all the wrong reasons, or relatively difficult reasons: civil wars, Ebola, but Liberia's come a long way since those challenging times. Remarkable progress has been made in areas that are really, really crucial to businesses: the ease of doing business, setting up a business, the regulatory framework around that, access to finance, and of course there's the whole regulatory framework around contract disputes. There are some real sector opportunities. Corruption is still a challenge, and that's an acknowledged factor. A lot is being done to address some of those challenges. There are some, probably, I would say Liberia is ranked pretty low amongst global economies in the ease of doing business indexes, particularly the latest World Bank one. Having said that, a couple of other challenges: sustainable development goals, equity, diversity and inclusion achievement are still not hugely strong on the agenda, but however, and I repeat, however, international trade plays a fundamental role in diversifying emerging economies and to improve that attractiveness. Countries such as Liberia have been making huge efforts and headway in the reform agenda to improve the business environment that leads to increased trade, investment, and wealth in the economy in order to enable it to develop and grow. So whilst we will talk about some of the challenges, we'll acknowledge them. We're going to keep this as real for you as possible. I really want to get into the nitty-gritty of opportunities. Henry knows me well, the team know me well, and they know that I like to focus on the positives, and every challenge brings an opportunity. So it'd be great to bring that out in our discussion. So let me introduce you to our speakers, the panel. We have the Deputy Minister of Commerce and Industry of Liberia, the Honourable George D. Wallow, the President and CEO of the Liberian Bank for Development and Investment, John B.S. Davis III. Mr. Davis, it's worth noting, is also President of the Bankers Association and Vice President of the West African Bankers Association. Then we have Executive Director of Intelligent Trade Africa and Advisory Board Member of the UK-Liberia Chamber of Commerce, Elaine Alexander. And we have Executive Director of Stronghold Finance UK, Matthew Goddard. So let the proceedings begin. I hope we have Honourable Wallow with us. I see that we do. I think he had some technical issues originally. Apologies again for the visuals, but we will overcome any challenges. So, Honourable Wallow, with a background in both industry and public office, you're really well placed, I think, to speak to us about the reform agenda in particular, developing trade policy and all of those things that lead to opportunities in Liberia for British businesses. Could you give us a little bit of an opening overview in respect of that, please?
Thank you very much to the platform. It been a technical problem with the visual, and so I think if you just will allow me to be able to participate in that, I'll be okay with that. So firstly, I want to say Mr. Kenneth Saad, Chairman of the UK-Liberia Chamber of Commerce, Annie Marie Mountain, Director of Global Business Network, British Chamber of Commerce, distinguished panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I say good afternoon. I want to thank you for inviting me to participate in this trade and investment roundtable discussion. I bring you greetings from the Minister of Commerce and Industry, the Honorable Maroney G. Dix, and the President, His Excellency, George M. Weir, who are equally concerned about improving the business environment and strengthening trade and investment relations between Liberia and the UK as partners to Liberia's development. As part of Liberia's efforts to transition its economy post-COVID-19, the government of Liberia is seeking foreign direct investment across a range of sectors, including agriculture and agribusinesses, water, energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, and tourism. To this regard, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry, as a key member of Liberia Economic Management Team, is initiating reforms to our business environment and working to increase commerce, trade, and industry activities. However, Liberia has a number of comparative advantages for investors interested in the country, such as the Monrovia Industrial Park, an industrial zone with a land area of over 500 acres of land, situated approximately 25 kilometers from the country's major seaport, the National Port Authority. The MRP is fenced with road connectivity, electricity, water supply, meant for manufacturing industries with a minimum leaseholder fees per acre. The ministry has secured a land space within the MRP for the construction of the National Standards Laboratory that will ensure standard conformity. The presence of the NSL at the industrial park is to strengthen manufacturer accessibility to government institutions that regulates their activities. The NSL will provide standard guidelines, ensure testing of manufacturer products, and ensure conformity to meet domestic and regional standards. Towards attracting foreign direct investment, promoting and accelerating economic growth, the government enacted in 2017 a law to create a Liberian Special Economic Zone Authority, LISA. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry, along with its economic management team, is working out modalities for the construction and utilization of the SEZ that will facilitate a one-stop shop commercial activities and create and regulate special economic zones, SEZs, across the country to facilitate the attractions of domestic and foreign investment capital. Within each SEZ, the authority will provide a one-stop shop for business registration, and the issuance of licenses, permits, and approvals, as well as the collections of taxes and fees. The SEZ law sets forth the rights, obligations of licensed developers and operators that will be in the SEZs. The law, as with the MRP, provides for special tax and incentives regimes towards attracting both domestic and foreign investments. Implementation of international customs standards will be required. The exchange and transfer of funds from activities of SEZ licensees, developers, and operators will be permitted. Currently, approximately 500 acres of land have been earmarked around the Port of Buchanan for the development of this project. Access to regional markets. Liberia is a member of the ECOWAS, of ECOWAS, which has a population of over 340 million inhabitants, with approximately 60% being young consumers. Liberia has ratified her agreement with ECOWAS Trade Liberalization Scheme, ETLS, and is in full operation of it. The ETLS objective is the establishment of custom union among member states, aimed at eliminating custom duties and taxes of equivalent effect, removing non-tariff barriers, and establishment of a common custom external tariff to protect goods produced in member states and to allow for free trade movement. Liberia, as a party to the African Continental Free Trade Area, AFCFTA, is in the process to ratify the AFCFTA agreement. The signing of the agreement establishing the African Continental Free Trade Area in Kigali on 21st March 2018 is a key milestone for the African continent, going beyond the border agenda. The agreement covers trade in goods and services, investment, intellectual property rights, and competition policy. The scope of the AFCFTA, beyond the requirements of a traditional free trade area. The agreement recognizes the importance of international trade and economic cooperation. It is further complemented by other continental initiatives, including Protocol on Free Movement of Persons, Right to Residence and Right to Establishment, which is intended to ease movement of people across the continent. The government takes profound interest in this endeavor, as it will enhance economic viability in our domestic economy, as well as strengthen the African continental trade zone. As such, technical working groups have been set up. Policy documents to complement the AFCFTA framework is being drafted, and legal structure is being put in place by the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. The Ministry of Commerce and Industry Investment Act of 2010 allows investors to repatriate capital and profits, which may include profits and dividends net of taxes. Remittances of money net of taxes in the event of sale or liquidation of business, and repayments of loans acquired from foreign banks. As we all are aware, the COVID-19 pandemic has caused economic disruption globally, and as such, government around the world is carefully observing the business environment to address post-COVID-19 recovery plan. The ministry's most current trade policy document is the Liberian National Trade Policy 2014-2019, validated by the end of December 2019. As in the midst of the pandemic, we were observing and have set up technical expert committees to draw analysis from the COVID crisis and develop a strategic trade policy that would improve economic recovery to this end. I would like to inform you, we are currently working on our trade policy. As the government drive to improve socio-economic and infrastructure outlook, there have been tremendous efforts to improve the living condition of its citizenry. Among some of the government initiatives to boost commercial activities are political stability, power supply, electricity, transport infrastructure, roads connectivity, wage rates, low cost of labor for both formal and informal sectors, stable exchange rate for the second year running. I want to thank you again for the invite, and I will await to respond to whatever questions or concerns you may have. I want to thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Honourable Wolo. That was very clear and to the point, and it's good to see and hear how much progress is taking place. Honourable Davis, can I turn to you now, because we've heard it looks like the overall strategic plan, which is really helpful. But as you'll know, as a man of finance, from a sort of private sector perspective, finance perspective, what would you say are the sort of, I think people will want to know about the financial aspects, the incentives, the critical financial services that are available to British companies, for example, or any companies actually, domestic and foreign, coming into that environment in terms of mitigating their exposure to the market entry and their operational risks. This is always fundamental, isn't it? We always hear about grasping opportunities, but finance plays such a big part in enabling that. So perhaps you could give us a bit of an overview of where you feel there is that complementarity there.
Thank you very much, Anne. And yes, that's a very important question. I am very happy to be on this panel and taking part in this forum. There are a number of factors and considerations which will definitely, in the context of Liberia as an important destination or as an attractive destination for investment, requires a serious look. For example, Honorable Wolo talked about the liberalization of our commercial space in terms of incentives, in terms of tax credits or tax breaks, or in terms of the freedom of repatriation of profits and dividends. From the financial sector side, we have 9 commercial banks, and these commercial banks have no restrictions on them in terms of how much of foreign exchange gathered and generated within country, for example, that can be repatriated. Just tapping on some of the points that the Honorable Deputy Minister made reference to. So when you look at our trade and investment incentives, of course, anchored within the WTO as well as within the ECOWAS Common External Trade and Tariff Regime, there are certainly opportunities with regards to investment in Liberia. Another point I would like to also emphasize in relation to your question has to do with the mode of financing in terms of accessibility of loans in Liberia. Again, it's one area where there are no real protectionist measures in terms of who banks can lend to, whether on the basis of geopolitical considerations or just on the basis of regional considerations. The banks don't have any such restrictions on them. If you are a business that clearly has a very good bankable proposal, it doesn't matter where you come from. The banks are open to providing access to financing to you in the context of their capital adequacy as well as their liquidity. I must add, though, that with a small caveat that the Liberia banking system is not a very large banking system. It's a small banking system with total asset size of around 199 billion Liberian dollars, or if you put that in US equivalent terms, around 1.12 billion US dollars, out of which deposits constitute about another 114 billion Liberian dollars, or around a little under 990 million US dollars. So expanding opportunities that can also benefit UK businesses in terms of looking at Liberia as a place to invest will definitely go beyond just the investment incentives that our trade regime provides. We will have to also look at a major component which I considered in my assessment of the subject matter, a critical missing link. If you look at Liberia's top 5 trading partners, and I'm talking about countries groups such as the European Union, for example, or the United States of America or China, a lot of what they do is significantly driven by their development finance institutions anchoring those trade relationships on partnerships in Liberia. And I would just like to stress a couple of examples to amplify that point. The US has the US Export-Import Bank and DFID championing US Liberia trade. With the US Export-Import Bank, significant about 70% of wheat imported in Liberia, which comes out of the United States for the 2 major flour mills in Liberia, are done largely on account of that relationship that has been established between the United States Export-Import Bank and the Liberia Bank for Development and Investment. So that's just a small example. If you look at, for example, the role that China Exim Bank and China Development Bank played with regards to funding Chinese contractors and their related businesses in Liberia, it also provides an avenue for boosting of trade with China. And as a result of that, we can all appreciate why China is one of the top 5 Liberian trading partners. If you take the ECOWAS region, for example, a lot of what ECOWAS does also in part is anchored on a relationship between the ECOWAS Bank for Development and Investment and Liberia in the context of its equity ownership in LBDI, its strategic partnership with EcoBank and other banks. One of the areas where lost potential in terms of tapping into business opportunities between the UK and Liberia has been, unfortunately lost by the UK, but significantly picked up by the French version of the European Union, is with regard to the role that Proparco and Groupe Agence Française de Développement, the French Overseas Development Agency, play with regards to structuring financial partnerships with about 4 banks in Liberia. So we have more than 15 French-oriented large establishments in Liberia, and these establishments are also benefiting from these opportunities provided by Proparco through Guarantee Trust Bank or EcoBank or Groupe Agence Française with LBDI and a few other banks. So in terms of the risk, which is the last point I would like to throw a couple of viewpoints on, in terms of the risk, well, there's risk everywhere. In Liberia, infrastructure still poses a big challenge to us, our road infrastructure, our telecommunications network, but our risk is evolving. That is the positive point I would like to stress. So the evolution of our risks towards mitigation as well as risk reduction over time is also helping to provide more avenues for businesses. So a couple of things I would like to also highlight in terms of this point. Businesses coming out of the UK to Liberia should first look at areas of complementarity in terms of agriculture that provides a lot of opportunities. The extractive sector is a little bit challenging, especially because of its alignment to infrastructure, but yes, still provides some opportunities. And the service sector, especially within IT, we see a lot of new entrants into our markets coming out of India, coming out of Malaysia, coming out of parts of Asia. And I believe IT is one area where we could see a lot of possibilities. So I will kind of pause here. LBDR has always been a key partner with regards to UK businesses. In the past, the Commonwealth Development Corporation was one of the shareholders of the Liberia Bank for Development and Investment. They left in the 90s, and that gap has not been filled in terms of new partners coming. I can tell you, LBDR, like several other banks in Liberia, have partnership with all of the banks that I named you, whether it is Proparco, whether it is Groupe Agence Française, whether it is China Exim Bank, US Export Bank, ECOWAS Bank. So you can understand why these countries, and through their development finance institutions, have been able to also attract a good component of Liberian trade.
I completely agree with you. I mean, I think it's a key enabler, the financial piece. So what would, sorry, I'm just going to take it a little bit further because it's fascinating, is what would your message be to the British banking sector in that case? Because it sounds like there's a direct correlation between engagement from the financial institutions of the countries that you've mentioned and the financial institutions in Liberia in order to create those opportunities. So what would you say is the key sort of message for British banks to get involved?
British banks, especially British development finance institutions, will need to strike important partnerships with banks in Liberia, LBDI, for example, like they did in the past, in a very significant way. Like and one of the easy examples or point of reference for British banks is what US Export-Import Bank does for the wheat milling industry in Liberia. Yeah. Right. So through collaborations with the US Export-Import Bank, Liberia, I'm just taking LBDI as an example. We were able to import into Liberia for the flour mills about $48 million worth of wheat in 3 years. Now that's just one small commodity in terms of the larger space of commodities. In the past, when CDC, the Commonwealth Development Corporation, was an active equity partner in LBDR with lines of credit and with Standard Chartered as one of our Bank as one of our commercial banks, we were able to provide a lot of support to to UK businesses, dealer importation of vehicles from the UK, Land Rover and other cars, for example. We were able to provide a lot of support to rubber concessions coming with linkages to the UK. And it is that kind of complementarity that we need in terms of a strategic partnership again with the development finance institutions of the UK. That missing link effectively makes it difficult for us to grow the balance of trade between our respective countries. And that would be my message to them.
Completely agree. Thank you so much. Thank you. That's great. Elaine, I'm going to come to you now. You have experience and expertise across the whole of Africa. So I'm actually going to ask some compare and contrast questions now, if you could. And I know you probably hate this. But what I'd love to know is, from your experience, that sort of holistic experience, how is Liberia doing? It's simple and to the point.
Well, I think you spoke earlier about, and I apologize up front for my voice, which is a bit croaky. I picked up some summer virus. It's not COVID.
Yes, you have to say that always.
It's amazing. Today, that is one of the things that we have to clarify. I think that, first of all, Liberia has made enormous strides in the development of policy and moving forward. And however, they are, as you spoke earlier about, I think it's about 170 in ease of doing business, which does pose challenges. I think a lot of the initiatives that the Honourable Minister mentioned in regards to the laboratories standards and all of that. That goes a long way to supporting the ability of Liberian businesses, or just in the attraction of businesses from the UK or wherever coming in, that they know that they have those facilitatory and support, what can I say, instruments and things like in place. Because I think that's a major thing. I think Liberia does have a lot of opportunities, simply in the fact that, investors come in different categories. I think Liberia falls in a place where there's a lot of natural resources that are available. The fact, as the Honourable Minister said before, there's the regional market, but that regional market offers a way into the global markets. And I think that we mustn't just often think of markets in isolation. We must often see them as departure points for accessing other markets. Excuse me. And I think that it's an important fact for investors. Any investor who wants to come in and manufacture or produce, whether it's primary or moving up the value chain, is to actually know that they have access to the global market in a way, whether that is through the region, through the intra-regional trade that we can now see facilitated through the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. It just needs that. They need to know that there is that, because that's how they view countries. If you look at investment, it tends to really follow global supply chains. Global supply chains have enormous control, I wouldn't say control, but influence on where investors want to be. And that's how they will look at where they want to come. It won't just be, if I'm looking for natural resources in the area of agriculture and I might want to process, I'll also want to understand what is favourable that Liberia can offer me in accessing the global chain that might be through the regional chain. So I think those are important facts. And I think Liberia trade policy has gone a long way to identifying those opportunities and trying to put in place the correct instruments and initiatives, such as the special economic zones. Having worked in cocoa in South Africa on those areas, I understand they have enormous ability to leverage investment in. I also think Liberia has probably opportunities for investors who are looking on the efficacy side, on production and manufacturing, lowered costs and that type of thing. So I do think that Liberia has opportunity. I do think there are things that still have to be worked on and corrected. And I also think the regeneration of West Africa, which is actually a big initiative at the moment, also provides Liberia an opportunity to access other value chains such as textiles and clothing, but it might be from a production side in the agricultural sector. So we mustn't lose sight of the different value chains that Liberia have the opportunity. The other area I'd like to say that I really believe that Liberia has an opportunity in is that the world's protein sources are diminishing, and Liberia has enormous opportunity from the fishing sector and fisheries and aquaculture, because that is becoming the new sourced protein. It's a different type of protein, but it's also a sustainable protein. So I think there's opportunity there. I'm not quite sure if I've actually answered your question, but I do think
you have. And actually what you've done, which is really good, is kind of opened the opportunity to other questions, which is always very helpful for a moderator. I mean, the supply chain, the global supply chain point, hold that thought, because I want to come back to that, because I think there's nothing like the Brexit debate that raised the profile and the debate around supply chains, because up to that point, nobody really conceived this idea that actually most supply chains are global and most businesses are directly or indirectly part of these global supply chains. They may not even realize they are, but there's that domino effect without any doubt. One question I'm going to come back to all of you if we have time is the climate challenge. It's a huge debate at the moment. UK is hosting COP26. We at British Chambers have just launched a big climate challenge campaign. That's a global campaign. We're working towards a program at COP26. I'm not going to put you on the spot. I'm giving you a heads up that I'm going to come back on this, because one of the things that our survey work has highlighted is that at the moment, there's a carrot and stick approach in terms of compliance in supply chains. But at some point, it's going to become a stick approach only, because legislation will dictate that you need to comply with certain rules and regulations around climate challenge, around meeting your net zero targets, etc. And that will have massive implication, particularly on SMEs that sit in supply chains. So with that in mind, just keep that in the back, because I'm going to talk to Matt first. But just have a bit of a think about that, because I think it would be really good to try and find out where Liberia is in this space, and particularly their SMEs and who are suppliers in supply chains, and how they're preparing for that inevitable change. So we'll park that one as a thought and blame Elaine, because she brought up the subject of supply chains, the fact that my mind took me there. And then the other one, Elaine, I'm going to come back to you on is on the EDI stuff. You've broken some serious glass ceilings. I've read your profile, your CV. You've achieved a lot as a woman in your profession. And I want to hear a little bit more about how you feel as a woman in business in that environment that Liberia is doing around its equity, diversity and inclusion, and DSG, development and sustainability goals as well. But again, we'll park that. Matt, hello. Sorry, I kept you waiting so long. I think what I'd love to hear from you is, I think you've been bandied as our case study. I hope you're expecting that. But, for me, these are favorite moments, I have to say, from experience. You've got a lot of experience, particularly around exploring viable trade finance, as I understand it from Henry. So if he's told me wrong, you can talk to him later. But maybe you can give us a bit of a flavour as a British business, from your standpoint, of your experience of doing business in Liberia as a whole. That would be great, please.
Well, we haven't done anything as yet in Liberia, to be perfectly frank, because we're fairly new on the block. We only established the UK office very early this year, which has a global remit. Prior to that, our investment bank was focused primarily on project finance and infrastructure finance across Middle East, North Africa regions. So we're going back in to various African nations and following up on transactions we've done before and new opportunities. And obviously a reintroduction to Liberia was very welcome. So we've had some discussions already around how we can assist with funding of supply chains. I think Elaine made a very good point that investment and flows generally come from supply chains being in place. Now, obviously, if you're a country that is more of an importer than an exporter, then that doesn't tend to necessarily facilitate that sort of investment. And obviously, imports of sugar, rice, fuels, etc. are quite usual. But if you start exporting, whether it's agri or fisheries or any sort of products, or aggregate and then start shipping scrap, anything that adds value to the exporter, the end buyers, is going to facilitate more interest in the country and more investment in those supply chains. So I think Elaine made a very good point there, and that's really what we're looking to follow in and facilitate those trade flows by way of providing the sort of bridge funding needed to get goods from A to B. That's really our mantra.
And you mentioned that you've just established in the UK. So tell us a little bit about the background of the business.
Yeah, in the UK, we set up as project finance and trade finance. So we're looking at funding projects until they get to turnkey stage, and then obviously the obligor takes over, primarily focusing on anything to do with power generation, the greener the better, solar, some waste to energy projects. Anything around recycling is very attractive currently. There's no real sort of we're pretty sector agnostic, jurisdictionally agnostic, so anything anywhere within reason, and look at each on their merits. Now within our offering, my background of late has been trade finance for various banks and funds, so I've come in to bolster up the trade finance requirement, which obviously is prevalent within project finance, because generally projects have a large capex or equipment component, and facilitating that within the overall project funding via trade finance works very well. And got the mandate then to follow that on to people that just want trade finance type facilities. So we're actively looking for people who are involved in any element of import and or export, goods movements, food, finished products, anything.
And you mentioned some of the sustainability elements as well. So going back to my point around, if you feel comfortable at responding to this or getting that conversation going around the climate challenge, net zero targets, meeting targets on the one hand, but actually being able to comply with requirements that are increasingly being demanded by the large companies that have these supply chains, this sort of the Airbuses of the world is a good example. How do you feel, I don't know how much you know about Liberia in terms of compliance and the ability to, or how they're doing on that journey? If you do, that would be great to hear, or your other experience in the region as well. And then I'll come to the Honourable Wallo for some comment on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, I can't speak specifically because I don't know enough about the Liberian efforts around sort of ESG, but certainly from a funder's perspective, ESG is very high up the agenda for reputational reasons and, just the general doing the right thing. Now, we have investors into our products, so we are putting together securitized streams of debt and then selling them down through our Luxembourg fund to corporates and professional investors who are buying the bonds, if you like, which is the way that we're funded. So anything with a green tinge attracts a better coupon. People want to have money in sustainability, and as a funder, I think compliance aside, people are a lot more focused on those sort of factors now. So 5-10 years ago, no one really was that bothered where timber came from. Then all of a sudden, the big bank started saying, well, hold on, is this sustainable product? Has it come out of the rainforest? Should it have been farmed? Should it have been chopped down? And people are very, very much focused on getting the right certification for sustainability. And I think, the banking industry as a whole plays quite a big part in that now. And I think it's very important, because if people can't get finance for the products they shouldn't actually be trading, then obviously that puts a different dimension on it. So I think that sort of you end up sort of clearing house just because of the lack of provision of funding for those sort of things.
Yeah, absolutely.
If that answers your question.
It does, and it leads me very well actually now to Honourable Wallo, because bearing that in mind, that ESG is such an important factor in decisions around investment, trade, pretty much everything now. How do you feel that Liberia is progressing on that, in that space, Honourable Wallo?
Thank you, Maria. Well, I think Liberia is probably doing a little better, because from a trading point in environmental wise, so in our coastal areas, currently the government is working on a coastal defense system that allows, because we've been dealing with some flood issue from the ocean, and so they've been putting some barriers to prevent that so that the fishing community doesn't go away, because that's where the livelihood base. And then from the industrial point, where we have the gradual, establishment of industrial facility, we put in what we call environmental impact assessment, and that is done by the EPA, because when we have a request for a new manufacturing facility, it's part of that requirement that you have to meet. You have to go to the EPA, which is the environmental impact protection entity, to do all of the analysis around what it is you want to do to make sure that is friendlier with the environment, so that we don't harm the environment, for our own sake. So that is part of that requirement. And if you don't match that, then meaning you cannot start up that facility, meaning that product or whatever manufacturing that is going to be harmful for the environment. And so by that means, we cannot have it there. So I'll give you a case in point. We have two manufacturing facilities. So we have a flour mill and a cement factory. So both of them sought permits to operate almost in the same facility. So we had both of them do the environmental impact assessment, and the flour mill was qualified for that production purpose because they have a controlled environment with what they do. And so the cement factory was not allowed to come online because of its pollution nature. So that's one thing that we work along closely with the environmental impact authority to make sure that when we have a new clients coming in to set up a factory, they need to go through that process, so that way we can make sure that we protecting the environment for the future generation. So that's one thing we kind of working with, because I know we have a good forest deposit, and we don't have a huge manufacturing base yet. And so it's okay now that we can put those structures in place, so that way we can kind of protect ourselves. And one thing we also do with these big mining companies that brings in a lot of chemical for their own mining work, we make sure that they have to meet the criteria set up by the EPA. So when we have an import request for some of what they use at their facility, EPA has to certify that is not as harmful to the environment. So then it's okay to bring it in. So we have a control measure around that. And so we think we can work on it, because, as we emerging towards the growth of industry, where we want to go, and the agro sector, we want to make sure that the business of things are actually follow, so we don't come back to undo what we didn't do right.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. That's really, really great to hear, because of course, when people talk about investment in terms of FDI decisions, all of this counts. ESG counts there as well. I'm conscious of time, but we did start a little bit late. So hopefully Henry will forgive me for running over, because I think we probably will by a couple of minutes or so. Honourable Davis, he has no choice. I'm holding the reins, unfortunately for him. Honourable Davis, I want to come back to you. You mentioned finance for FDI. We've talked about FDI a lot today, investment into Liberia. I'd be quite interested on the export-import front, the trade bit, and not just barriers, etc., or market access issues, but more around finance for exporters, and what sort of you feel are the gaps in value chains, supply chains within Liberia that UK companies can supply to. What would you say are the big needs of Liberia potentially from British companies? Is that something that you feel you could give us a bit of a flavor for at all?
Oh, certainly, Anne Marie. So when you look at Liberia's current export base, you will note that one, iron ore still plays a dominant role in Liberia's export base. Rubber still plays a dominant role in Liberia's export base. Interestingly, over the last 3 to 4 financial years, we've seen increasing influence of gold, diamond, and other precious metals also creeping into that space and significantly attracting an appreciable amount of export earnings. Now, in the context of supply chains, whether it is the iron ore industry or or the rubber industry, or the oil palm industry, or the cocoa and coffee space, there are always opportunities for smaller players to either supply the required logistics to these various entities, whether they are large concessions or whether they are small private entities. And that is where UK businesses could see a bit of an advantage, whether it is input for tools, input for chemicals, like in the rubber sector, for example, and in the gold sector, whether it is input of vehicles or moving equipment, or just even providing financial services in terms of, I like to go back to my DFIs and the lack of UK DFIs significantly in that space, trade finance lines to provide support to this business. It is one area that we believe needs to be looked at a little bit more holistically. Because if businesses are to get a new lease of life, either in terms of benefiting from whatever the potential there is in Liberia, then they either come into the value chain dimension of it, or the logistics and supply dimension of the business processes and the various intricacies associated around them. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the biggest British player in Liberia is still ArcelorMittal, and that's the largest iron ore concession in Liberia. And ArcelorMittal employs a lot of Liberians, about 5,000-6,000, I'm told, or thereabout, and they provide a lot of outsourcing services. I've funded, I provided loans to logistics companies providing services to ArcelorMittal. We've provided also opportunities for other companies that may not necessarily have been Liberian companies, so to speak, but operating in Liberia and coming out of places such as Ghana or India, also providing banking services for them. And yes, there is absolutely no reason why British businesses cannot compete with those companies, because at the end of the day, it's about the quality of the service you provide to these large concessions and the value you get for the service you provide. So in light of your question, there are opportunities still existent in Liberia that can be attractive to the British companies, irrespective of our ranking in terms of ease of doing business, or irrespective of the very small banking sector we have in terms of availability for access to finance. There still are opportunities here. And the one last point you touched on previously is about sensitivity to climate change and sensitivity to the environment. I sit on the National Climate Steering Committee of the country, and we took a few very important decisions about 3 days ago. And one of those decisions was the creation of the Carbon Consultation Group for Liberia, because carbon financing, carbon credits is also very critical, as well as climate resilience and adaptability to some of the various environmental changes around us, and taking actions to make sure that our country improves on its 6.1 million hectares of forest land, which we are not prepared to degrade any step further, because we have great cover in terms of the environment. And as a result of some of the decisions we've taken, we are going to be having a roundtable very soon with all of the banking institutions in Liberia, so that they can also inject in their lending regime and in their credit policies sensitivity to the environment, especially as it relates to climate adaptation, climate resilience, and improving Liberia's carbon score generally. We know that we may not be very sophisticated or very industrialized like other countries in terms of carbon emissions, but even where we are, just protecting the forest and protecting our biodiversity is now becoming a subject matter conversation and matter of concern. And we are committed to making sure that every step we take as a country preserve that heritage for other generations.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. We could do a whole event, Henry, just on climate challenge. I'm going to finish. I'm not going to let it go. I'm sorry, Henry. I'm going to ask Elaine about diversity and inclusion. She's achieved so much, so she's going to get the last word on the panel. I know we have some closing remarks as well from Karen Lohman at Oxford Business Group. But Elaine, very quickly, if you could just, because that's a whole other event we could run as well. Tell me a little bit about your experience and what could be better and what they're doing well as well on the EDI stuff.
First of all, I think, Africa has, as a whole, and especially through the African Union, has supported women and youth. We had I remember when I was at the AU, we had the women and youth was a whole year spent. And I think, if you look at Liberia's policy, they do address that issue, and I think so therefore there's already a commitment to making a difference. I still think that we have a long way to go, but I do think Africa, in my honest opinion, is probably further than many developed countries. I've spent 30 years in Africa. I've come back to the UK. I've been here working with UK companies, and quite honestly, I think that there's more diversity and less gender bias in Africa than there is. I'm sorry, I've got to say it's
fabulous message.
So I really think that Africa's doing great, and I think Liberia is too. And I think that there's just so much opportunity, and there's so much. There is so much opportunity. We talk about. I just want to say one last thing. We talk about companies, UK companies selling in to Liberia, and those companies don't often think about selling in. Yes, there's a need, but think about, can I do it there? And that's what I do with companies. It's also what I do with governments, looking at the policy and how to rethink. Let's think rather on a merger and acquisition than just let's do promotion and investment and that type of thing, because it's all about targeting and women. I'm sorry, I just had to I hope that wasn't too controversial, but
not at all.
I think Africa has made great strides if you look at where women are today in Africa.
Fantastic. What a brilliant note to finish the panel on. And I'm sorry we ran on, but I think it was worth it, definitely. So I'm happy now to hand over to another fabulous woman, Karen. It's over to you.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure for me to conclude this roundtable, being the Africa Managing Director for Oxford Business Group, so a firm doing research on economic development. And I think we really unveiled many of the opportunities Liberia has to offer. But I also think that so much more needs to be described and unveiled. Just to give you a bit of background, Oxford Business Group has been operating in the region for now nearly 20 years, covering and analyzing sectors' performance, economic indicators, development strategies, and primarily supporting FDI. So I think we would all agree that African emerging markets have increasingly attracted attention, and Liberia needs, of course, to be one of those countries attracting the attention. These African markets, Liberia included, of course, are likely to become a considerable political and economic force. They traditionally represent an enormous opportunity for entrepreneurs, multinationals and investors who seek local markets and export platforms based on their local assets, such as low labor cost or natural resources. And I think Liberia, when talking about those assets, is very, very well positioned. So our analysts at Oxford Business Group have been conducting on-the-ground research throughout those years, providing our global audience and readership with business intelligence. And this business intelligence is very much needed to stay ahead and assist the international business community in making fundamental long-term investment decisions. And we need, I think, to reassess in this roundtable that knowledge is power. And when thinking about Liberia, those words resonate very, very strongly. So with its strategic location in the heart of West Africa, this young population and numerous natural resources, Liberia has all the potential to become one of the most dynamic economies of the continent in the next decade. And I think increasing its position as a foreign direct investment recipient in the region is a reality. Now, FDI, I think we would all agree, is vital for unleashing the potential of key sectors such as mining, we mentioned it a bit earlier, agriculture, fisheries, and tourism, in which Liberia has significant untapped opportunities. Now, the importance of foreign investment is not only related to capital. I mean, we've discussed about this, about financing, but let's be honest, also it's vital for knowledge transfer, best practices that have a positive impact in the country's workforce and for the country's development as a whole. FDI needs to be conducted in partnership with local authorities, and I'm very thankful to Your Excellency for being with us today and showing support to effectively contributing to development. FDI is key to reducing inequalities, investing in new skills, creating jobs, having a very positive impact in the growth and well-being of the population. I'd say that under the administration of President Weah, Liberia has taken important steps in becoming more attractive and more open to investment, improving aspects such as the time for starting a business, for example, access to credit. We also mentioned it in the roundtable. But significant reforms and deregulations still need to be tackled in order to continue improving the country's position as an attractive investment destination. And FDI can't be attracted to the country without increasing awareness and access to information. So we, for example, at OBG, have been working as a partner with several of the key economies in the continent, providing fresh and direct from the ground information across various sectors, allowing, for example, allowing investors to be informed, reducing the risk in the decision-making when investing their capital, for example. And mostly our aim has been to ensure the international business community is aware. I think it's really about being aware of the opportunities emerging countries have to offer. So we mentioned it during the roundtable, of course, and many only know about the World Bank doing business rank for any given country, but not necessarily actually understanding what it entails and mostly being unable to leverage any information because of their scarcity and lack of actionable advice. So yes, we see that Liberia is 130 something in the World Bank ranking, but what does this mean? What are the strengths? Where are the weaknesses? So in the region, just to give you a few examples, like Ghana or Gabon or Cote d'Ivoire, countries we've been covering for quite some years. Ghana, to start with, in which we've been present since 2011, is among the world's top 10 gold producers, having generated 3%, for example, of global production in 2018. That same year, the country overtook South Africa as the continent's largest gold producer, with a key role for FDI in operating in the country. In the first semester of 2021, Ghana recorded $874 million USD in investment, of which $830 million were from FDI, an increase of more than 30%. So I think those numbers are extremely encouraging because of how close this country is from Liberia. In another country like Gabon, a country we've been covering since 2010, with a population half the size of Liberia, the GDP jumped from 3% in 2011, so 1 year after we started covering the country, to 9% in 2019. And maybe finally with Cote d'Ivoire, talking about tourism, we've been in Cote d'Ivoire since 2013, having a permanent office there. Well, international tourists' arrival went from only 380,000 people in that year in 2013 to nearly 2 million in 2019. So we see that all these countries, of course, all having still their difficulties and weaknesses, but had those amazing achievements. And I think that with the right communication, the right deregulation, Liberia can replicate the success of its African neighbors. I think a strong partner producing economic reports and research released into major investment terminals such as Bloomberg or Standard & Poor's is really key to attracting FDI. And the presence overall of any country on investment terminals is really key. I think we all know that Liberia, as we speak, is not very much present on those investment terminals, and that would really needs to be addressed. So we very much trust that at Oxford Business Group that Liberia is welcome, is ready, sorry, to welcome more economic research and more economic development reports, ESG research, as we just recently mentioned, to start unveiling really to the world how to invest in the country, how to develop business with Liberians, a country I strongly believe has the potential to be known as a safe and stable destination to invest in the future. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think all that remains for me to do is to thank you all our speakers today, to thank Henry and the Chamber, and of course, they will be absolutely crucial to getting the messages out as a really exciting new chamber on the block. So thank you very much, everyone. And apologies, we ran on a little bit. Hopefully it was